Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight. And I guess we're going to take a break from all the Kawhi semi news. There's not really much to rehash on the whole Kawhi thing. So we
Was
went
it?
with another gimmick tonight. Jason came up with the worst trades in NBA history, which again was a very, very interesting topic. And I don't know how you approached your research today after we discussed this, but give me your parameters or what you looked at before you start revealing the trades that you felt were the worst.
Well, first thing I went with gut feeling. Like I would try to remember what are some really bad trades that when I saw them, I was like, what the what? Like this trade doesn't make any sense. And I only really had two that came to mind for me, like
Okay.
for my lifetime. So then I was just like looking at like I did some searching, some bonker trades, and I like read through some lists, and I was like, these are the ones that I think. I have four written down. I don't know how many you have written down, but I have four that are written down that are like these trades definitely qualify as some of the worst trades in NBA history for a variety of reasons, whether it be the generational talent that was traded or the the talent that was traded that maybe didn't pan out in one place and then they immediately go somewhere else and it leads to championships. I don't know if you know which one I'm referring to there, so we'll say we'll um we'll talk about it. I guess I really just kind of like the two were gut trades that I feel were important, and then the other ones were just some from some research, Mike.
Okay. So my main criteria that I used was looking at did said trade lead to at least one championship, if not multiple championships for the quote winning team in the trade. And
So
then
that means Luca Anthony Davis is not on the table for you.
that is not on the list. No, that trade is not on the list.
Okay, okay, that was
Not
an
on, not on
honorable.
my
It's an
list.
honorable mention on my list, Mike.
Yeah, not on my list. And not that that's not a horrendous trade because clearly it is. But the honest truth is we haven't really seen exactly how it's going to play out. So it's hard to term it one of the worst trades in NBA history when we really don't know yet how it's going to
Bad it
turn
is.
out based on Luca's summer and his body transformation and his performance in Eurobasket and what looks to be a renewed interest in being in decent basketball shape. It probably doesn't bode well for the Dallas Mavericks. However, you also have to take into account that the Dallas Mavericks also are backing into Cooper Flag as well. So I can't, although on its surface and just in the moment, clearly it's a terrible trade, but we already know the results of some of the other trades that we're going to talk about fully. And so it's hard for me to put the Luca Anthony Davis trade onto this list until we see it play out 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So that's kind of where I landed with that one. So to me, like I said, I was looking for as you said, a generational player who was traded that resulted in a championship or in many cases multiple championships, and then looking at the utter despair of what the other team in the trade received in return for said superstar that led to multiple
All
championships. So
right.
that was kind of the way that I approached it. So why don't you go ahead? We'll go through your list
Well,
first and see if any of your list is on my list, and then we
okay.
can circle back to the trades that I came up
All right.
with.
Here we go. Scottie
Okay.
Pippen from the Seattle SuperSonics to the Chicago Bulls for Olden, Polynice, and two draft picks. It led to Jordan getting his right hand man 6 NBA championships. If Jordan doesn't get banned for, I mean, if he doesn't take a break from basketball for, I was joking, Mike. You were supposed to chuckle there. If he doesn't take a break from basketball for a few years, who knows? Maybe he gets 8 championships, 7 or 8 championships. Listen, this was a no brainer to me, Mike. This one was, you know, this one. I guess there are three that were kind of no brainers to me, but this I remember that Scottie Pippen wasn't drafted by Chicago, but if I'm being completely honest, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that he got traded for Olden Polynice and two draft picks. But now that I know that, even more cements this as a boneheaded mistake by the Seattle Supersonics. And honestly, I don't even know what those Seattle Supersonics draft picks led to the picks led to, but I'm guessing it's not much because the Bulls were good, so they weren't getting anything good. So I mean, I'm guessing Kemp and Payton didn't come from those trades. Would be my guess.
No,
but even
no, they did not.
Do you know what players they got with those picks or no?
I do not. In all honesty,
I'll try to do some crack research right now. I'll just crack research.
All right. All right. So
you can add your piece to it.
Well, clearly, the reason why this trade belongs on the list is because Scottie Pippen goes on to be a top 50, top 75 player in the history of the league, leads to the three-peat Chicago Bulls, leads to 6 championships with Michael Jordan.
Sylvester Gray, Mike. That's the guy they got.
Okay.
And,
do you know Sylvester Gray?
An option to swap first-round picks with the Bulls in 88 or in 89.
Sylvester Gray was a big, giant white center who
I wouldn't have known that name until I just read it. So
I believe he was not a very effective NBA player. Let's just put it that way. I think Sylvester Gray, for some reason, I want to say he went to Kansas, but I could be wrong. Anyway, Olden Polynice came out of Virginia, and in his NBA career, he wasn't a complete disaster. Now, he was a complete disaster compared to Scottie Pippen, but he did average 8 points and 7 rebounds a game, and he played in the NBA for 15 seasons. So this wasn't a case of you did not get a productive player. You just did not get a player anywhere near the caliber of Scottie Pippen. And so when you look at that trade, Scottie Pippen coming out of NAIA Central Arkansas was not by any means a lock. And clearly when you go back to that time, so we're talking Scottie Pippen is drafted in, let's see, 87, right?
87.
Drafted in 87. So we're talking about a completely different era in terms of people being aware of draft picks. At that time, people were aware of draft picks because they watched them play college basketball. And Scottie Pippen's games at Central Arkansas were not games that were readily available on network TV or cable TV for people to watch. So
they probably didn't even hear knowledge. They probably didn't even hear of the NAIA.
There was correct. There was not much knowledge of Scottie Pippen as a player. It's kind of like the way that you and I prepare for the draft or look at draft picks today, where these guys are coming from international or whatever. I don't know the draft picks today the same way that I did back in that era. And I can honestly say, remembering to that time, I don't remember anything about Scottie Pippen as a college player other than what I learned after the fact. Once he became Scottie Pippen, then you go back and you see the highlights and all those things. But nobody was aware of Scottie Pippen. He was not on anyone's radar as far as just your general average NBA fan. And clearly, great trade for the Chicago Bulls and terrible trade for the Seattle Supersonics, leading to, as you said, the partnership with Michael Jordan and 6 NBA championships, which clearly fits my criteria of a lopsided worst trade if you're the Supersonics, and clearly one of the best trades in the history of the Chicago Bulls franchise, and one of the most impactful trades when you look at the history of the league, considering, again, the partnership that Pippen had with Jordan, which ultimately leads to all the success in that Chicago Bulls dynasty. So I think that's a good one.
All right. I'm off to a good start. All right. I'm going to go even older school, Mike.
All right.
Wilt Chamberlain, 3-time reigning MVP, traded from the Sixers to the Lakers. Did that one make your list?
That one is on my list.
I mean, listen, the bottom line is this. You traded I know that the Sixers did not have success, but that would have been like.
They didn't have relative success to the Boston Celtics, but don't forget they had won the title I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they had won the title not the year, not the season immediately prior to him being traded, but the season before that. It was the 67. Maybe it was the season immediately after he was after he that they won the title, he was traded, because I feel like they won the title in 67, 68.
No,
And
66, 60. They won in 66 and 67.
Okay,
I'm
got it.
looking at this year, 66,
Okay.
67. And then he traded the reigning the MVP winner to the Lakers in 68. And they got in the LA, and they in exchange they got Jerry Chambers, Archie Clark, and Daryl Imhoff, which I don't know that I could ever have known those guys existed in the NBA. Maybe I'm but anyways, I don't know. It's crazy to me. That's a crazy move.
Well, here's the thing. I think, and this is when you look at, this is sort of a referendum on Wilt Chamberlain's historical place in the hierarchy, right? Is that people from that era who were around Wilt, both when he was with Philly and then eventually when he was in LA, that Wilt was a somewhat unique personality and he didn't always rub people the right way. And clearly, if you're
he
getting rid
rubbed
of a three,
lots of people in the wrong way, Mike.
okay, I understand. We'll leave that comment for a different podcast. Anyway, but this is clearly an indication of the fact that Wilt had worn out his welcome in Philadelphia, and not necessarily on the basketball floor, but just for whatever reason, they felt like they didn't want to deal with him anymore. Obviously, they had a hard time getting past the Boston Celtics, as did every single team that existed during this era. And it was clearly a mistake by the Philadelphia 76ers, because Wilt goes on and plays in 4 finals with Jerry West. Now, they only win 1, but the 72 Lakers are certainly among probably the top 5 teams in the history of the league. They have the longest winning streak in the history of the league at 33 games. That was the team that held the record for most wins in a season for a long, long time at 69, before it was broken by the Bulls and then the Warriors. And Wilt teams up with Jerry West to get him his first championship. And look, there's no denying the greatness of Wilt Chamberlain. The NBA record book is just splashed with his name everywhere you go. If there's ever a trivia question about anything offensively that you want to ask and you're not sure what the answer is, your best bet is to just guess Wilt Chamberlain, because whatever, 50 years after the guy retired, his name is still probably the most prominent name in the NBA record book. And for a team to give up on Wilt or to trade Wilt because of whatever reason, whether it was his inability to get along with coaches, or the fact that his teammates maybe didn't love him, whatever the case may have been at that time,
Yeah.
to get rid of a 3-time MVP for 3 guys who, as you said, unless you are a super duper NBA fan from the 1960s and 70s, you may have heard some of those names, but more than likely, those are names that are lost to history for most people that are listening. And Wilt Chamberlain is obviously one of the biggest stars and just personas in the history of the NBA. And like I said, it led to, in this case, not multiple championships, but certainly 1 championship. And at that time in the league, there wasn't a bigger name that could have been traded other than Wilt Chamberlain. So I think that is a worthy addition to this list.
All right. We're going to keep the Lakers theme going.
Okay.
Kobe Bryant from the Charlotte Hornets to the Los Angeles Lakers for Vlade Divac. That has to be on the list. Six NBA, like, was it 5 or 6 NBA championships Kobe won? 6, right?
Kobe won 5. Kobe
Oh,
won
5.
5. Kobe won 5.
5.
3 was Shaq, and 2 with
2
him
with
as the lead dog.
Gasol. But I that has to be on the list, just because, I mean, the Charlotte Hornets have been abysmal. I mean, I know they even left and came back after that trade, right? They were gone for a few years and they came back and they've still been abysmal. And then on top of it, they traded for the worst GM ever in the NBA in Vlade Divac, who went to Sacramento. I'm just kidding. Anyways, this has to be on the trade. This has to be on. Now, obviously, Kobe Bryant was a straight out of high school player. Who knew if he was going to pan out? You know, the main reason supposedly the trade got done was that Jerry West was impressed during some workouts and just loved how he just worked so hard and was there for way longer than anyone else was ever doing and things like that. And I'm sure we could find an article or a podcast that talks about that whole situation. But I mean, just the fact that, you know, obviously Kobe probably, I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe an episode that we have to do again is we have to bring out like we have to re-rank like the top 25 players or something. We haven't done that. All time. Like, I don't know if we need to redo that, you and I, but yeah, that's what I think.
It's been a while since we did that. That might have been within the first year of the pod. So we're talking about that's 6 years ago, probably. At least 5. It's at least 5 years ago that we did our top whatever. I think we did our top 3 first team, second team, third team all NBA of all time. So yeah. I think the Kobe piece of this here, when you look at just what it did for the Lakers, clearly leading to 5 NBA championships. But then also, as you said, when you look at the other side of it, because again, we're trying to look at this from the perspective of the worst trades in NBA history, the Charlotte Hornets moving temporarily, coming back, and basically have not been relevant in any way, shape, or form for a long, long, long time. Not that this trade can directly be traced to their current ineptitude, but clearly, if you have a player of Kobe's caliber and they were able to keep him in Charlotte, it certainly makes a huge difference in that franchise's trajectory and what you can do with your team and your success and the environment that you can create. And so I do think that when you look at both sides of this trade, and go back to the Scottie Pippen trade, right? Eventually, now it's a long time removed, but the Supersonics end up moving out of Seattle and going to Oklahoma City. There's not much worse that can happen to your franchise. And again, not that traces directly to Scottie Pippen, but bad things befell the Seattle Supersonics after the Scottie Pippen trade, and bad things have certainly befallen the Charlotte Hornets since the Kobe Bryant trade. And again, not that those things are directly correlated or connected, but certainly the fortunes of the Los Angeles Lakers have been much more positive than those of the Charlotte Hornets. So I think those are all 3 really, really good trades to have on there. They're all 3 that I had on my list as well. My list maybe was a little bit longer. I have a couple more. I don't know if you want to share the other ones that you had kind of as honorable mention or
Well,
ones that
I
you
have one
thought.
more that I was only did 3. You gotta get me to do my 4th one.
Yeah, go for it. I'm not trying to stop you.
The Brooklyn Nets trading for the aging core of the Boston Celtics. Not because I mean, and the end result is Boston. You know, the long term gain was Boston won the championship, right? They won the championship 2 years ago. Okay, the short term was the Brooklyn Nets imploded their team, and they haven't been good at they've made the playoffs a few times, but they've never been able to recover from that trade. They had no assets. They traded everyone for aging superstars that never panned out. Then it ended up trying to do the whole Durant, Kyrie, James Harden thing. James Harden is all I need to say, and it wasn't from there. But yeah, the big trade being, obviously the big original trade was the trade for Garnett, Pierce, and just completely blowing up their team and the future there.
That trade was one that we were there to and much more, I think, aware at that point of the Will Chamberlain trade, you and I weren't even born when that trade took place. Kobe Bryant was a name that, again, at that point, maybe we knew who he was just from studying and looking at the draft, but nobody had any idea. He's a high school player. Nobody has any idea how that he's eventually going to pan out. And then this trade, I think, is one that even in the moment, it just seemed like, holy cow, this is not going to be a good trade. I guess I'm always a proponent of you don't trade young for old, and you don't trade young draft picks for old guys who are past their prime. It's one thing if you're getting a player who is in their prime or maybe even in the back end of their prime, but I just don't think that Garnett and Pierce at that point in their careers with the injury history and their age, and they just clearly were not going to continue to be a championship level core. And that was the Mikhail Prokhorov, the sort of the apex slash nadir of the Prokhorov tenure as a Brooklyn Nets owner, where it seemed like he was going to come in when he bought the team and kind of like Matt Ishbia thought he knew a lot, spent a lot of money, wanted to bring in superstar players without much thought as to how do you build an actual roster with these aging guys who can't stay healthy and who are past their prime. And clearly, from the Nets' point of view, they were never able to put together any type of a competitive team with those guys at the center of it. And then giving up 3 unprotected draft choices to the Boston Celtics, who eventually turned 2 of those into Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who led to a sustained run of excellence from Boston. Only one championship, I'm happy to say, but clearly could have been more when you look at that run that the Celtics have been on. And who knows, they may not be done when Tatum comes back. I think there's still, if you keep Jaylen Brown around and you can rebuild that team, there's still a possibility that those two guys can win another title at some point in their Boston Celtics run together. So yeah, this trade set the Nets in the wrong direction and set Boston up for long-term sustained success. And maybe you can look at it and say, well, Boston has not maximized what that could have been. At the same time, you look at the fact that when Jason Tatum gets picked third by the Celtics, 2 guys that went ahead of him, Markelle Fultz, who clearly never worked out, and Lonzo, who ended up getting hurt and has been a good player when he's played, but nowhere near the level of Jason Tatum. So just the Celtics being smart as well. And Jaylen Brown picked 4th overall, another really good draft pick when you think of what Jaylen was coming out of Cal, where people weren't sure what his offense was, and they knew he had a high motor and that he was a high character guy, but I don't think anybody thought that he was going to turn into the player that he's become. And so the Celtics not only did a great job in the trade, but then they did a good job of maximizing the return that they were able to get. When you're getting draft picks, you never know what you're going to get, obviously, because you're not trading for players. And so part of it just becomes well does your team draft and what do they do with the picks that they're able to obtain? And clearly in this case, Boston was able to parlay the haul they got from that Garnett Pierce trade from the Nets with they were able to parlay it into some pretty good talent that enabled them to win at a sustained level for whatever we're going on 8 years or so of the Celtics being a contender, a contender in the Eastern Conference for sure. So,
Yep. All right, that was my last one, Mike. So
that was your last one. All right. Okay. So I got a couple more I want to just throw at you. So I'm going to stick with our Lakers theme because I think the big Lakers one that led to multiple championships was the Lakers acquiring Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then Lou Alcindor from the Milwaukee Bucks. And this one's a little bit different because Kareem had won a title already in Milwaukee with Oscar Robertson and then basically said he wanted out of Milwaukee and wanted to be traded to the Lakers. And so as we know from the modern NBA, when a player demands a trade and then tries to force his way to one franchise, it kind of kills the leverage that the trading team has to be able to maximize the return on that player. But Kareem was traded for Junior Bridgman, Dave Myers, and Brian Winters. So not exactly three guys who were
Brian Winters, we've
outstanding.
had him on the podcast.
Not Brian. Brian's son has been on the podcast. Brendan has been on the
I know.
podcast. That is
I
know.
was
That is
joking.
Brian's son, Brendan, from Pro Skills Basketball, has been a guest multiple times on the podcast, was part of our 1000th episode. And actually, Junior Bridgman, I forget now. I don't know. Junior Bridgman he's become like a multi-millionaire. And he owns, I believe I want to say he owns Wendy's franchises, and he has been a tremendous post NBA career success. And somebody at some point tried to connect us with Junior Bridgman to get him on the podcast. And I don't think I was ever able to connect with him for whatever reason. But he was a good NBA player. Brian Winters was a good NBA player. Dave Myers, I can't say, honestly, I remember much about Dave Myers as an NBA player, but Junior Bridgman and Brian Winters, I do remember. They were both fine players, but clearly Kareem is at worst. At worst, he's a top 10 player. Some people might even argue that he's a top 3 or top 5 player. He's somewhere in the top 10 at worst. And if you're trading a guy of that caliber, just like we talked about with Wilt earlier, you would expect to get back a guy who is at least a multi-time all-star or somebody that you could at least sell your fan base on. Hey, yeah, we had to trade Kareem, but we got back so-and-so. And in this case, they just really didn't get back much of anything. These guys were kind of journeyman players. And Kareem, to go back to my earlier point about leading to championships, Kareem and Magic through the late 70s and 80s end up winning 5 championships together. So clearly for the Lakers, huge win in that trade. And the Bucks really never have come close to winning a title until 3 years ago with Giannis. And so there was a long time for the Milwaukee franchise wandering kind of through the desert without as much as a superstar player. They did have the one run to the Eastern Conference Finals with Big Dog Robinson and Ray Allen against Allen Iverson, but never really got back to the level that they were when they had Kareem on the roster. So that's one I think has to be included again because of the stature of Kareem in the history of the league and the fact that it led to all those titles in LA. So that was another one that I felt had
That's
to
fair.
be.
That one's fair. Can I guess another one? Can I guess another one you might have had on your list?
Sure, go for it.
Bill Russell trade. The Bill Russell trade, is that on your list?
Bill Russell trade is it's tangentially on the list. It's hard to, I mean, clearly, if you go with this criteria of what did it lead to, I mean, the fact that the St. Louis Hawks drafted Bill Russell and then ended up trading him before he played a day for their franchise to the Boston Celtics, and then Russell goes on to win 11 rings in 13 seasons. Clearly a win for the Boston Celtics in that trade, and clearly a loss for the St. Louis Hawks. The Hawks did get back Cliff Hagan and Ed McCauley, who both ended up in the Hall of Fame. So in this case, unlike the trade for Wilt or the trade for Kareem, the other team did get back some quality players. But again, when you're comparing Bill Russell and the success that the Celtics had in the 60s and throughout Russell's career compared to what the St. Louis Hawks had, it pales in comparison. That one, again, because I wasn't around for that, you weren't around for that, a draft day trade back then. I really don't even know the circumstances behind it, just in trying to read about it and figure it out. So I looked at that one. I didn't necessarily have it on my list, but clearly we've talked about some pretty big name centers being traded in the early part of in the first 25 years of the NBA or the first 30 years of the NBA. There's really no bigger names than Russell, Wilt, Kareem, and all those guys are clearly top 10 players in the history of the league, and all at some point were traded. And Wilt was traded a couple times. So kind of interesting that guys with that level of stature in the history of the league were traded. I have one more trade that I want to include that probably isn't necessarily as impactful and probably was defensible in the moment, but then you look at the result of it and hard to imagine that this ever happened, but the Dirk Nowitzki from the Bucks to the Mavs for Tractor Trailer, who Tractor Trailer coming out of Michigan was a guy that everybody had known and heard of famously for just his ability as a player, but also his size and kind of unique personality. And then Dirk Nowitzki, a guy from Germany that nobody had ever heard of. And I remember I saw actually Nowitzki play his rookie year at the Coliseum, and I happened to be sitting on the floor for a game with my friend Mark Mormon, who had seats on the floor at the Coliseum through his dad. And I just remember watching Nowitzki play and thinking, man, this guy, like, he's so stiff. Like, he doesn't bend. He has a hard time running. He just looked like an old man who had arthritis. And obviously, Dirk went on to have a tremendous career. And if we think about my parameters for this particular exercise, it did eventually lead to a championship for the Dallas Mavericks. And Tractor Trailer went on to have a
Oh, the
very
real
pedestrian.
reason this is on the list, Mike, is because the Dallas Mavericks won the championship against the Heat, right?
Correct. I mean, even so, it's a pretty lopsided trade in terms of the two players' accomplishments, right? When you look at what Tractor Trailer accomplished, and this is one of those rare trades that it was just a straight up, they just flip flop draft picks. And when you look at the accomplishments of the two players being traded straight up one for the other, it's a pretty big disparity. Even if you eliminate the championship for the Mavericks in 2011 over the Heat, it's still you just look at the career statistics, the impact, the fact that Dirk spent his entire career in Dallas, wins the MVP. There's other things. Clearly, the championship cements it. And I think when I'm looking again at these worst trades in NBA history, I do think that having an impact on championships is really what matters. But just straight up between these two guys, is the production is crazy in terms of the difference between those two guys. So that's why I included that one. And I guess I have one more before I have a personal take. The other one that I looked at, I don't know if you looked at it at all, was the Celtics getting Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish for Joe
No,
Barry Carroll.
that wasn't on my list. That wasn't on my list.
Well, but here's why it's kind of again on the list because Celtics had the number one pick. They looked at the draft and decided, well, we don't think that Joe Barry Carroll at that time was kind of the consensus number one. They didn't think a whole lot of him or didn't want to draft him with the number one overall pick. And so they trade with Golden State, get Robert Parrish, who at that point was kind of he had a ho-hum career up until that point, comes to Boston and becomes a guy who maybe wasn't a perennial all-star, but certainly a guy who was a very, very important part of their championship teams. And then McHale obviously goes on to be one of the best power forwards of his era and probably one of the best low post artisans in the history of the league. And so getting those two guys who Parrish and McHale are both Hall of Fame players for Joe Barry Carroll, who didn't have much of an NBA career, that's a pretty big heist. And clearly during that era, the Celtics win 3 titles in the 80s with Bird, McHale, and Parrish. So meets my criteria of leading to multiple titles. And then the last thing that we have to mention, and I don't know if you thought about this or maybe it's before your time, but there are rules named after a particular owner
Wayne Embry.
of the of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Wayne, no. See, this is way before your time. So, what rule is in place that says you cannot trade consecutive draft picks? Do you know what rule this is that I'm referring to? This is why NBA teams cannot trade consecutive first round draft picks because of this owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Oh, I should know this, but I don't.
You should
You when
de-
you say it out.
you should definitely know it.
What is it?
Ted Stepien. Ted
Oh, the Stepien
Stepien.
rules. Yeah.
The
Why did I
Stepien.
say Wayne
The Stepien.
Embry? It is Stepien rules. Yeah.
Okay, so Ted Stepien owned the Cleveland Cavaliers for, I believe, 3 seasons from 1980 to 1983. During that time, I'm going to read you 4 trades that he made. And on their surface, they don't sound incredibly bad on their surface, but let me read them to you.
Okay.
In February of 1980, the Cavaliers traded their 1982 first round pick and Butch Lee to the Lakers for their 1980 first round pick and Disco Don Ford. Okay, got that one?
Okay.
All right. In September of 1980, they traded their 1984 first round pick to the Mavericks for Mike Bratz. Okay, got that one?
All right. Yep.
In October of 1980, they traded their first round picks in 1983 and 1986, plus Bill Robinson to the Mavericks for Richard Washington and Jerome Whitehead. Are any of these guys that the Cavs traded for getting you excited right now when you think about that? So far we have
I
Don Ford, Mike Bratz, Richard Washington, and Jerome Whitehead. Anybody got you excited at this point?
no, I wouldn't know anyone, but I don't know
Okay,
any of those
so
names.
so just to refresh your memory so far, the Cavs have traded their 82 first round pick, their 83 first round pick, their 84 first round pick, and their 86 first round pick. So which pick have they not traded yet? I'll
85.
help you. The 85 pick. Well, here we go. In February of 1981, the Cleveland Cavaliers traded their 1985 first round pick and Chad Kinch to the Mavericks for their 1983 third round pick and Jeff Houston. Now, Jeff Houston was a point guard who was averaging 16 points and 5 assists for the Mavericks. So I guess semi-defensible. So that is 5 consecutive years of first round picks that the Cavaliers have dealt away. So they dealt away from 1982 to 1986. 5 consecutive draft picks. Now, you might say to yourself, well, it's not that bad. You know, they got some players that were serviceable and helped the team to win 23 or 24 games a season back in the early 80s when Stepien owned the team. And I will tell you that I remember, I don't know if you remember this name. Do you remember this name from Cleveland radio? Pete Franklin. Do you remember Pete Franklin?
No.
Okay, so Pete Franklin had he was like the original sports talk show host on 3WE, which was the flagship station of the Browns, the Cavaliers, and the Indians when I was a kid. So we're talking again in 1980 when Ted Stepien buys the Cavaliers. I am 10 years old. So I'm in my basement playing ping pong with my dad, listening to Pete Franklin, and he used to just completely just destroy Ted Stepien night after night after night about just what an idiot this guy was and how can he be doing this and just all the talk of what a terrible owner Ted Stepien was and how bad it was that he did what he did with all these draft picks. So you might say to yourself, well, these teams that Ted Stepien made these trades with, they probably ended up messing up the draft and taking some terrible players. But just can I read the list of the players that these draft picks that the Cavaliers
Sure.
traded away? Can I tell you who they are that what these draft picks turned into?
Sure.
All right. So the 1982 number 1 overall pick that would have belonged to the Cleveland Cavaliers instead went to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Cavaliers received the Lakers' number 22 pick in 1980, where they selected Chad Kinch, who they later traded in one of these other trades. You'll probably recognize his name, and I already said. The Lakers selected with their number 1 overall pick in 1982. Do you have any idea who this player is? An integral part of the Magic Kareem championship teams.
Well, I was gonna say I knew it couldn't be Matt. I don't know. Just lay it on me, Mike. Just lay it on me.
James Worthy from the University of North
yeah.
Carolina. Number 1 overall pick, James Worthy. All right. So probably didn't turn out too well for the Cavs. The Dallas Mavericks received the number 11 pick in the 1983 draft. That became Derek Harper. Derek Harper was a long-time, very, very good NBA point guard. Probably made a couple of all-star teams in his day. Not a superstar, but a very good player. So we have 82 James Worthy, 83 Derek Harper. 1984, the Dallas Mavericks had the number 4 pick from the Cleveland Cavaliers. They picked a teammate of James Worthy's from North Carolina. Any idea who this player might be?
No.
Sam Perkins was selected by the Dallas Mavericks, number 4 overall. Sam had a pretty good NBA
He had a
career.
good run
Again,
in Seattle, baby. He had a good run in Seattle.
Again, he did. Not a superstar. He had a good run in Indiana. Not a superstar, but a really, really, really good player. Then, 1985, the Dallas Mavericks had the 8th pick, thanks to the Cleveland Cavaliers. In this case, they selected a player from Germany who had played for the University of Washington. Any idea who this player may have been?
Detlef Schrempf.
He also had
I don't know.
Detlef Schrempf.
Oh, that was a guess. That was the only German name
good,
I could think of.
That was good. I like it. Detlef Schrempf. And the final draft pick, number 6 overall in 1986, the Mavericks selected a guy from the University of Michigan who ended up having some drug problems, a tremendously talented player who, when he was on the floor, was very effective, but his career was cut short because of drug problems. Any idea who this player is?
No.
Roy Tarpley from the University of Michigan. Tarpley was a 6'11", kind of do everything type of player. Never really lived up to his potential because of all the drugs. And also, they did a 1982 trade, the Cavs, with the Pistons, where the Cavs received Steve Hayes, and the Pistons got a 1986 second-round pick, which turned into a guy affectionately nicknamed the Worm.
Dennis Rodman.
So for 5 consecutive years, as the Cavaliers traded their draft picks in the Ted Stepien era, they gave up James Worthy, Sam Perkins, Derek Harper, Roy Tarpley, Detlef Schrempf, and Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, that's all in a vacuum, though, because if they got one of those guys, they wouldn't have had a good as draft pick, right?
It's true. I mean, it's clearly true. But so it looks much worse. Well, I shouldn't say it looks much worse. It definitely looks worse in retrospect when you look at the names that are attached to it. But when you look at the names that were coming back for number 1 draft picks, it just doesn't make any sense. So Disco Don Ford had averaged, his highest average in his career was 9 points and 4 rebounds a game. We traded a number 1 pick for him. Mike Bratz, traded a number 1 pick for him. He was averaging at the time 8.5 points a game and 2.7 assists. Let's see. Kermit Washington was averaging 4 points and 1.6 rebounds when we traded for him. Jerome Whitehead was 24 years old, but had not made much of a mark in the NBA. Jeff Houston was the only guy who really had any type of statistics that was traded in any of those trades. So anytime you're talking about the worst trades in NBA history, Ted Stepien and his disastrous ownership stint from 1980 to 1983 with the Cleveland Cavaliers has to be mentioned. And again, you were not old enough to have lived through that era and remember it, but I remember it. It was an abjectly horrible time for professional basketball in Cleveland. I remember watching games occasionally with my dad, and those Ted Stepien teams would almost fight to see who could grab the inbounds pass so that they could just dribble the ball up and shoot. It was some of the worst basketball that has ever been played in the city of Cleveland from a professional standpoint. And Stepien's ownership was just a huge cloud over it. And then what happened was he was, I don't know, forced, but he eventually sold the team to, do you know who they sold the team to? The name of what the arena was first called?
Gund.
Gordon Gund. And as part of the sale to the Gund
And
family,
Carlos
the
Boozer
NBA,
lied to a blind man.
yes, there you go. But the NBA felt so bad for the Cleveland Cavaliers franchise and what Ted Stepien had done to it that they granted the Cleveland Cavaliers a supplemental draft pick in each of the 4 subsequent drafts after Stepien sold the team. So they received a pick in 83, in 84, in 85, and 86. Here are the players that the Cavaliers selected with those picks. In 1983, the number 24 pick was Stuart Granger, who didn't really do much for the Cavs. In 1984, they picked number 12, Tim McCormick, a guy who was a journeyman. He had a pretty long career in the NBA. Big white guy, wasn't very good, but again, had sort of a journeyman career. The next 2 names are 2 names that you will recognize. In 1985, with the number 8 pick, the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Charles Oakley. And in 1986, with the number 8 pick overall, the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Ron Harper. There's some dark, dark stuff in the Ted Stepien area. When the fact that trading Harper for Danny Ferry and the fact that Oakley never played for the Cleveland Cavaliers, ended up trading him to Chicago on draft day 4. I can't remember who they traded. I can't remember who they traded Oakley for. Coming out after they drafted him. I should know that, but I don't off the top of my head. Let me see if I can find it while we're anyway, the Ted Stepien era was a dark moment in Cleveland Cavaliers history. Let's put it that way.
The Cavaliers. Oh. They got Keith Lee and guard Ennis Waitley.
Yeah, Enos Watley. Keith Lee, that's right. You probably don't remember Keith Lee either. Keith Lee was a great.
I don't know any of the names other than
great college.
So
yeah, and Enos Watley was a point guard from Alabama who ended up. I think he played a few years in the league. Keith Lee was a great player in college and never panned out in the pros. Certainly didn't have anywhere near the career as Charles Oakley. So I had to get Ted Stepien in there because I have some personal recollections of that time as a young kid, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old when Ted Stepien owned the Cavaliers, and he basically murdered a franchise for the better part of half a decade. And the NBA had to step in and, as we just said, give the Cavaliers supplemental draft picks to make up for the horrendous ownership run of Ted Stepien. So whether he's the worst owner in Cleveland sports, I don't know. We have some owners on the football side that are certainly vying to take that title from Ted Stepien, but he has to be right at the top of worst.
We're not spending any time on that, right? We're not going to sit here and talk about it.
No, there's nothing to say, man.
Just I want to say one thing.
Move the team, move the Browns somewhere else. Give them the name. I want an expansion team with a new owner, a new name, new colors. Get it all out of here. Get this franchise out. Get it out.
Somewhere in an alternate universe, last night, Baker Mayfield threw a touchdown to David Njoku to beat the Kansas City Chiefs with Nick Chubb in the backfield scoring a touchdown. That was my line last night, Mike. That was my line last night. It couldn't have been a more deflating and also at the same time happy moment in my life when Nick Chubb scored the go-ahead touchdown with 2 minutes left, and then Baker just said, "F this! I'm going to drive down the field and score a game-winning touchdown." That was just so fantastically Cleveland that I don't know what else to say.
There's not even anything. There's nothing to say. There's nothing to say. If
Did you
Baker,
know
if
that,
we would have
Mike?
kept him, he would have
Did you know
continued.
that Baker?
He would have continued to be. He would have continued to be the same mediocre quarterback that he was the whole time he was here,
Mike,
except for the Jets game when he first came in, his very first game. Other than that, he was at best mediocre, which is why I was okay with the move that they made. Obviously, when we start talking about worst trades in NFL history or worst moves, if Baker continues on the trajectory he's on now, this is going to be right there with it. But I don't necessarily, if you take out the Deshaun Watson stuff off the field, there was no question in the moment that the Deshaun Watson, his last year as a player for the Texans, was a much better quarterback at that moment in time than Baker Mayfield was. And so I think it's defensible in the moment if you take out the off the field stuff, which obviously you can't, which obviously meant, hey, we probably shouldn't have done that. I'm glad for Baker. And it's whatever. It's fine. It's fine. I don't even at this point I just laugh at the whole franchise. I can't even take them seriously.
Yeah, listen, the bottom line is this, Mike. I'm looking really quickly because I saw a stat. I'm trying to see if I can find it again. Baker Mayfield has the most passing touchdowns in the entire NFL since joining the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I saw
Baker
that too.
Mayfield has Baker Mayfield has the most passing touchdowns in the fourth quarter since joining the Bucs. Baker Mayfield has 12 fourth quarter comebacks in his career. I mean,
it makes you wonder again that the Browns process for, and look, I will go on record, and anybody who's listened to the podcast through to the end and heard us do our Browns talk, I've never been a defender or a fan of Baker. I've always maintained that I think he's at best an average NFL quarterback. He's certainly been better than that in his time at Tampa Bay to this point. But you got to wonder back when they let him go, coming off the injury, you just wonder what was going on behind the scenes, how badly the personal relationships between Baker and whether it was Stefanski or Haslam or Andrew Berry or whatever it
wasn't
was.
fancy. This was a Haslam wanting Deshaun Watson, and Haslam admitted that he's the one that wanted Watson. I mean, he admitted that this offseason, Mike. He admitted it.
Yeah,
okay,
which
was a Haslam.
Which is fine. Yeah, which is fine. You just wonder about the process.
I'm surprised he tried to sign Justin Tucker yet.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We got Schmidt. He made all his kicks. He made all his kicks the other day. That was great. If only he could have done that in the first game, they would have won.
All right, let's end this. We were cooking. I thought we were going to be done in 35 minutes. Now we've got on an 18-minute tirade about the Browns the Ted Stepien rules.
That's right, exactly. Hey, we had to get some Cleveland talking. Look, 0-17. Here we come, baby. That's all I can tell you. 0-17.
Yeah. So, programming note. We don't know if we're going to have an episode of NBA talk next week. We'll see. We'll see what the fortunes provide us. Right, Mike? Is that what we're going to say? We'll see.
Yeah, that's what we'll say.
Mike
I got a little surgery going on Tuesday. So we'll see what my status is for Tuesday night. I should be able to sit and talk, I would think.
No.
I don't know. We'll see. No? You don't think I'm going to be able to sit and talk?
You're going to be so uncomfortable, Mike. You're going to be uncomfortable. Trust me. I've heard all about this stuff. You're going to not be comfortable at all on Tuesday.
All right. We'll figure it out.
Maybe we'll record early or something. I don't know.
Maybe we could do a Monday or a Sunday. I don't know. We'll figure something out. If we don't, then we'll be back in 2 weeks. But who knows?
Once again, if there's nothing prudent to talk about, then.
Well, we're getting close to where we're going to have to start doing previews and stuff because the season really isn't that far away at this point. So
we're a month away. But we don't know. We still don't know some important news. Like, where's Russell Westbrook going to end up and all that stuff. We gotta wait to see before I can make my predictions, Mike.
We got predictions. We got previews. We got wins pools, and we got a lot of stuff to do. So
you want to lose again? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I'm probably going to lose again. Well, you told me we're going to put together some fancy charts and get them up so we can share the screen and actually see all the see all the statistics. So I'm looking forward to that when
Well,
we get there.
I might have overpromised. I overpromising, under
No.
delivering, but we'll see. We'll see.
I'm counting on you to come through. This is your technological contribution to the pod. I'm looking forward to seeing it in a nice fancy graphics that you were talking
Listen,
about.
I'm not going to be sitting around twiddling thumbs in a few weeks, so I'm gonna.
I guess that's true. I'll have plenty of time to start working on stuff. We might be adding some bells and whistles. Who knows what we're gonna do when I'm 2 weeks away, man. 2 weeks away from being retired. How about that?
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. 2 weeks away,
Good
and you
stuff.
scheduled the surgery in your second to last week, so it was perfect.
It is what it is. It is what it is. Didn't work out for me in all due respect there. So it's the way it goes. All right.
Alrighty.
Let's wrap it there. Worst trades in NBA history. I think we did a pretty good job of summarizing some of the disastrous moments and triumphant moments for the teams on the other side of those trades. So thanks for checking us out tonight. We will hopefully, my body willing, be back next week. If not, we will see you in 2 weeks on our next NBA episode. So thanks for checking us out this evening, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks.